welcome! Today we're going to talk about infants, toddlers, and screen time. I'm going to compare the North American versus the United Kingdom screen time guidelines for infants and toddler. For today's video, we're going to be talking about infants from age 0 to 1 and toddlers from age 1 to 2. Now normally we would consider toddlers from age 1 to 3, but for the purpose of screen time guidelines, they break it up between kids age 2 and under. So for our purposes, toddlers are only from age 1 to 2 for this video. Please do not feel judged if you're not following the guidelines. The goal is to build a bridge between the screen time guidelines and our actual lived experience. Nurturing TechnoGens is here to help parents overcome their fears and frustrations with their kids' digital lives. I simplify complicated information, share services and strategies that you can use today to make tomorrow easier. So in addition to the UK guidelines, I'm also going to compare the World Health Organizations because they are actually fairly similar to the North American guidelines. So I know that these guidelines seem vague, there's not a lot of context behind them, and they often don't meet our reality, and that leads parents, and myself included, to just kind of ignore them. But I'm hoping that if we review them a little bit more and go into some detail, we can start to see reasons why they might be helpful. While the UK guidelines do provide a little bit more information and are honest about the limitations of research, they explain that there are risks associated to child's development, but they don't really talk about that development. So in my next video, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about child development, and I hope you'll join me for that video. And please subscribe, and we can continue the conversation. And if you have comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you. The American Pediatric Guidelines are recommending no screen time at all for kids from 0 to 18 months. The Canadian guidelines say no screen time for kids under 2 years old. As well, the World Health Organization is also saying no screen time for the kids under 2 years old. Some parents disagree with this and make jokes about the old days of parenting without screen time. There's one funny meme that goes around Instagram. It says, yeah, sure, I could parent without screen time, but then again, I could also churn my own butter. I get it. Parenting is really hard and any help is appreciated, of course. But there is a problem with straight up ignoring the guidelines, and it could hurt your kids. So the North American guidelines are based on risk. They use the past 50 years of parenting science to make assumptions about the risk because we really do know a lot about human development. The research on screen time is actually very new, but they've been studying TV for decades. So the science regarding infants and toddlers and screen time is starting to provide some clues into the developmental harms at this very early age. And some of the fears about those risks are coming true. What I like about the UK guidelines, they're organized a little bit differently. And after reviewing the science, they state clearly that there is not enough evidence for them to make an actual clear statement on how much time will cause harm. Unfortunately, they can't say that there is no harm or no risk, meaning that even a small amount of time on screens could be causing harm, and yet they can't say what the length of time on screen would be to cause harm. So what they talk about is the parents should be managing on an individual basis the sleep, physical, and developmental needs of their own children. I'll tell you right now that the UK guidelines align a lot more with my own perspective on digital parenting. In my book, Nurturing TechnoGens, 8 Essential Skills in Parenting the Technological Generation, I talk a lot about screen time, but I also talk a lot about parenting because it all flows together. We can't just separate one thing and blame all of our challenges on screen time because there's so much more going on in our lives. But we can identify where, when, and how screen time could present opportunities as well as potential risks for our children. And I'll put a link in the description for my book if you're interested. I hope you're getting value out of this video and you'll consider subscribing. I really look forward to continuing this conversation. In my next video, we'll go into a lot about the developmental, what's actually going on in your infants and toddlers. But don't panic, the guidelines are there to help. When my kids were little, there was this movement that these baby Einstein videos, then Teletubbies, if you watch this, it would help your kids to learn and get smarter. And I use them all the time. Well, that evidence was totally debunked. It was a passive screen. my kids were watching. They weren't watching a lot of it. I'm not worried about how it affected them because I was doing all of the other things that I needed to do as a parent to engage them. And you know what? The truth is, it did give me a break a little bit once in a while. And unfortunately, as they got older, it did make them want to watch more and more television, which was much hard to manage.